This Israel report is brought to you by the Blue Agency. Your Israel property is in good hands. Owning properties in Israel can be a great investment, but challenging to manage if you're based abroad. The Blue Agency will manage every aspect of your property, finding and vetting tenants, maintaining your property and getting it rental ready, negotiating contracts and collecting rentals, reporting back to you regularly. The Blue Agency has built a reputation for trust and confidentiality over 20 years. The Blue Agency, your Israel property is in good hands. Contact us at www.theblueagency.com.
The Israel Report for the latest news and insights with Anthony Reich.
Anthony Reich, Boker Tov, good morning. Hope you're well.
Boker Tov, Chodesh Tov, of course, now with Rosh Chodesh and tomorrow being the month of Elul, we're warned that Rosh Hashanah is only 4 weeks away, so lots to do until then. But Howard, I was reading a little bit more about the use of the term Zionist and Zionism, especially amongst Jewish communities in the diaspora. And I just wanted to throw out this term for listeners and maybe have a little bit of a discussion, if it's appropriate to do so, about whether it's important or necessary for us to stand up and talk about whether we feel that we are a Zionist or not a Zionist. And even if we do feel that we support the concept of Zionism, whether it's important for us to make that public, because the term Zionist has become so politically loaded and so controversial that saying you're a Zionist is almost, it kind of reminds me a little bit of people who go along to, I don't know, Alcoholics Anonymous for the first time and say, you know, I'm Anthony and I'm an alcoholic. You have to kind of own up to this, that you're a Zionist. And just to remind listeners, Zionism is the concept of Jewish homeland in Israel. That is what a Zionist is. If you support the idea of a Jewish state in Israel, then that is a Zionist. And there are many non-Jews who are Zionists and who are proud to stand up and say, I agree with the idea that the Jews should have a homeland in the land of Israel, and therefore I am a Zionist. Do you think it's important for people to be willing to stand up and make that statement, even if it might bring consequences on you? Because let's be honest, not everybody wants to hear out loud that you are a Zionist. It might create some issues in your relationship with other people who potentially don't support the idea of Zionism. Is the concept of being a Zionist enough for you to break friendships or long-standing relationships because you suddenly understand that whoever you've been associating with over many, many years doesn't support the idea of a Jewish homeland in the land of Israel? I just think that there is a discussion to be held about this, and I'm interested to hear what the view is from the listeners about whether they feel it's important to stand up and say you're a Zionist, if that's what you are, even if it might bring negative consequences to you and to the environment in which you operate in.
So let's put it out there, 061-895-1019. How important is it to stand up and say that you are a Zionist? I just want to give you my, just a little bit of a nuance around it. I have to say that whereas I stand up and say very proudly, as everybody knows, that I'm a Zionist, the reality is that I don't like the word, and I don't like the and I've been a little bit through my life uncomfortable with the concept, primarily because I think the word Zionist has often been almost hijacked or claimed by segments of the Jewish community that I don't necessarily relate to, and in many ways, I felt excluded from that word because as a religious Jew, growing up, often Zionism didn't belong to me. It belonged to a secular movement that wasn't mine. I think it's changed over the while, and whether I believe the word is a good word or not, I still think it's important to stand up and say it, and I've been saying it very loudly and proudly for many years. But I do think that there's more to it than just meets the eye.
I do agree. I mean, I think the word is very loaded, and when you say it, it almost has a sound about it that almost like has some foreboding around it, especially in recent times because of the way that it's been used as a derogatory term for many people. But I was very struck when I watched a video of a gathering of young Jews in the United States recently under the auspices of an organization which does fantastic advocacy work on behalf of Israel and helps young people, particularly in the United States on campuses, but also elsewhere around the world. I think they're active in South Africa as well. Helps people to give them the tools to be able to stand up and deal with the negative consequences of them being Jews and them being supporters of Israel and them being Zionists. And I was immensely struck to see young people who I know for them, this is an incredibly difficult thing. Yes, there's a major cost for them to stand up in front of the camera and say, I am a Zionist and I am a proud Zionist. And I think that takes a lot of courage in today's world. And I think it also allows us just to think a little bit about this concept of a Jewish homeland in Eretz Israel, in the land of Israel. That's what Zionism is. And in spite of what the negative connotations might have been over the years through your growing up or elsewhere, that is the base of what Zionism is about.
Sion, yeah. And it's certainly. So give us your thoughts, 06189510119. Right-wing violence has increased dramatically in the Judea and Samaria areas over the past few months. It's an uncomfortable subject, but an important one nonetheless. What is actually being done about this?
So I do want to put it out there because it's very controversial and uncomfortable for many people in one way or another. And the reality is that the settler movement, which has really done some incredibly good work on behalf of the state of Israel, being willing to go and live in places and develop the land, which has potentially been quite dangerous and maybe even controversial to many, but nonetheless has been supported by the state over many, many years. That movement seems to be getting a little beyond itself now in terms of sticking to the letter of the law. And the reality is that it doesn't seem as if the government or the army are able or willing in recent months to do anything about it. And there were a number of incidents recently where hikes were planned or protests or events were planned by that movement to do things which are obviously not according to the law. And they've made it quite well known that they're going to be taking these actions ahead of time. And yet nothing has been done to prevent it from happening or to necessarily deal with it while it is happening. And unfortunately, these incidents cause damage and deaths. People were killed while trying to carry out these activities. And I think the army is just too stretched at the moment to be able to deal with not only the Gaza border, and not only the Lebanese and the Syrian border, and not only a war in Iran and a war against the Houthis in Yemen, but also terrorism coming out of the Palestinian Authority area in Judea and Samaria, and also now having to deal with Jewish people who seem to be willing to take the law into their own hands and to assert themselves in a way which is not according to the law, and yet it's not being policed at all. And in fact, Mike Huckabee, the U.S. the U.S. ambassador to Israel, made a statement just yesterday saying that this is terrorism and that the U.S. embassy is very involved in watching to see what's happening here. So Mike Huckabee, who really has been an incredible advocate on
Absolutely.
behalf of Israel, has taken an extremely firm view by criticizing the behavior of these people and these activities. Now, I'd just like to put out what the dilemma really is. The dilemma is that if you have the right to land, and if other people would kill you in order to take over your land, then there is a certain view that says, well, if it's going to be either be killed or kill them in order to assert yourself, then you need to be willing to stand up and to assert your control and to assert yourself over this area. Don't be withdrawn from the situation. Be willing to stand up and say what you really believe and to take action in order to do that. It's sort of similar to the discussion that we had about whether we should go onto the Temple Mount or not. If that's our holiest site, why would we be nervous to assert ourselves there? And by showing that we're not willing to do it, it shows a certain weakness. That is certainly the view taken by the settler movement, where they are willing to go and do whatever is necessary in order to assert themselves on their land, to essentially treat our enemies as they would treat us. That's the argument, that this is what they would do to us. Therefore, we have every right to do it to them. I also throw in the whole concept of Jewish values. Do we need to behave like our enemies, even if it doesn't reflect our values? If it is a dilemma for us, we know that in order to assert ourselves, we need to take certain action. But by taking those actions, it really transgresses who we are as a people and what our background and our value system is all about. And I think therein lies the issue. I fear that we lose ourselves somewhere by trying to act like our enemies in order to make sure that we have our piece of whatever we do. And I think that by individuals taking the law into their own hands, they really transgress the basic values that they put forward, that they claim to live by. Those values are not reflected in their behavior. And we have an army and we have a government and we have police who should be dealing with these things rather than individuals out there doing it according to the law of the jungle, which is essentially what's happening in the West Bank right now, in Judea and Samaria, where many people are taking over pieces of land and behaving in a way which is really not in keeping, I would say, with Jewish values. But again, this is something that I think listeners should have their say on. And do you think that we need to be tough and just to stand up to our enemies, even if it means, transgressing the laws, even if it means taking the law into your own hands? Or do we at some point say, this is not according to the way that we ought to live our lives, and we should try to uphold our basic values and allow the law and the police and the government to take care of these things?
061-895-1019. Let us have your thoughts on that. An Israeli mother and daughter have disappeared without a trace in Vienna. This is becoming a very strange story. I just wonder what's really going on here.
Well, there's a lot to be said about this. I mean, the mother and daughter traveled to Vienna, Mali Yahalomi and her daughter Liel. Mali's 50 and Liel is 23. They traveled to Vienna. They stayed at an apartment in Vienna. They had been in touch with their family until a certain moment, and then the contact was lost, and they did not board their plane home. And there seems to be no trace of where they are right now. And interestingly, just this morning, the Rishon LeZion Magistrates Court has issued a gag order on this whole story so that nobody is allowed to report anything further. This is at the request of the police, the special crime unit, national unit for combating economic crime. Ironically, they are the ones who are involved in this. The family have come out very much criticizing some of the statements that the police have said. There were rumors that large sums of money were withdrawn at some point. There was also a story that that their phones were found on Saturday. Now, the family is Shabbat observant, and they wouldn't usually use their phone on Saturday. And it's been reported that the phones were found on Saturday. I don't think that's got anything to do with them necessarily using them. But it seems as if, though, neither Mali nor Liel have their phones in their possession. The phone seems to have been traced to somewhere completely, some train station area in Vienna. So this is a very, very odd story. There's lots of speculation whether there might be terror involved, whether it might be because they are trying to simply disappear without trace themselves, all orchestrated by themselves, or whether something else might have happened to them. Obviously, we'll be watching the story over the coming days, but it is a very strange and concerning story.
Indeed, it is, Anthony Reich. That's where we leave it. Thank you, as always. It's been great to have you back the last few days. Wishing you a fantastic weekend, a Shabbat Shalom, and we'll catch up with you on Monday morning.
That Israel Report was brought to you by the Blue Agency. Your Israel property is in good hands. Owning properties in Israel can be a great investment, but challenging to manage if you're based abroad. The Blue Agency will manage every aspect of your property, finding and vetting tenants, maintaining your property and getting it rental ready, negotiating contracts and collecting rentals, reporting back to you regularly. The Blue Agency has built a reputation for trust and confidentiality over 20 years. The Blue Agency, your Israel property is in good hands. Contact us at www.theblueagency.com.